much. Joining us now is Republican Congressman Brian Mast of Florida. He's a United States Army combat vet and a Purple Heart recipient. Good morning, Congressman.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for being here. Are you worried about what you've seen thus far about the Trump team's ties to Russia?
I'm not worried about the ties that I'm seeing there, and to tell you the truth, I think it's prudent that you not see some of in the outspoken words from the president in front of the media on what he thinks should be done with Russia. I think it is some of these things happen behind closed doors. Maybe with Rex Tillerson, we don't want to see a repeat of what happened with President Obama and the failed Syrian red line. If he puts something out there that he can't walk back from, that's not what we're looking for. So hopefully Tillerson is going to speak with the Russians and go and tell them, hey, you know, if you mess with the bull, you're going to get the horns. But
given that Mr. Trump has used fairly mild rhetoric about Vladimir Putin and been complimentary in some things, as well as all of the reporting that there are top-level Trump advisors during the campaign who had what was described as constant or regular communication with Russian officials. Does that cause you any concern?
Yeah, you know, I look at this situation, whether, you know, you're talking about any officials on the campaign side or General Flynn or any piece of this conversation, and I think it's absolutely fair for people to ask questions, for people to expect that we go through the process of intel and oversight, looking at all sides of these issues to say what is actually happening. That is a fair process. That is something that I think it's okay for the American people to expect. I expect that out of my peers as well, so that's not something you're going to get any pushback from me on.
But then why do you think that your colleague, Chaffetz, chairman of the Oversight Committee, is looking into the leaks and whether or not the leaks were illegal of possibly classified information, but not the substance of the allegations of the Trump ties to Russia?
Well, I certainly encourage him to look at that piece of it, whether the leaks were illegal. That is an important part of it, because that can undermine the internal workings of our national security, and that is something that is very important. But beyond that, yeah, we absolutely have to move on and say, you know, the American people want to see an accounting for this, and that's something that we should give them.
So I hear you, and you're saying that you can do both. Why then do you think that Jason Chaffetz and Bob Goodlatte are not doing both? They're just doing the leaks. I couldn't begin to answer one of them. You know, maybe this is just a case of them looking at one piece right now and planning on moving on to the next. I'm not going to sit here and speak for their actions or what their plans are. They haven't discussed them with me. What questions do you have about the Trump administration's ties to Russia?
So the questions that I have for the Trump administration are things that I would want to ask them and get answers behind closed doors. But I would want to ask them, you know, what is your intention? How do you view Russia? Are you viewing them maybe not necessarily as an enemy, but absolutely as a major aggressor on all fronts concerning the United States of America? How do you plan to address those things? I don't necessarily expect you to, as I said before, say them in front of the media, because we don't want to get ourselves into a situation that we cannot walk back from by saying, this is what we're going to do, Russia, if you do this, and we get ourselves into, you know, an escalation of force situation with Russia. That's not what we want to get into. But yeah, I want to hear the answers on how they view Russia and what it is they plan to do in response to Russia putting a ship off our coast, what it is they plan to do in response to Russia trying to participate in anything having to do with our elections or any other way that they're trying to manipulate anything having to do with the United States of America.
As you point out, as we speak, there's a Russian spy ship off the coast of Connecticut. That's the farthest north that spy ship has ever been. Do you think that the Trump administration has been strong enough in condemning that?
I think this is exactly why you're going to see the Secretary of State speaking with Russians. I suspect he's going to be behind closed doors, giving them some sort of ultimatum about it and making sure that they know this is not something that's going to be allowed to continue. And, you know, either they rectify the situation or they're going to pay the price.
I want to ask you about some other news that we've learned this morning, and that is that the Pentagon is considering sending combat troops, ground troops, to Syria to fight ISIS. You are in the perfect position to share your thoughts on this. You're a Purple Heart recipient. You encountered an IED in combat. You lost both legs. What do you think about the idea that U.S. troops would be going to Syria?
It's never an easy idea to send U.S. troops anywhere. The reality of that sort of situation is that there is going to be a loss of life. There is going to be a loss of limbs. Those are my peers. Those are my friends. I take that very, very seriously. I think one of the biggest missing pieces as we talk about what's going on in Syria is that we forget a little bit about our own heritage. We're Americans. We're very familiar with what a revolution is. And you have a nation, a crumbling nation there where there are literally, over 1 million refugees scattered throughout the region that should be being trained to come back into their nation and fight for their communities, fight for a way to return to their area. I think they should be looked at as what should be the brunt of that fighting force, because that is what a revolution looks like. If they want their community, their home back, they need to fight for it. And this is something that's been going on for nearly 6 years. There's a lot of training that could have been done, in that period of time to get people to be very capable fighters and go in there and fight to take back their own country. And that's something that would make them a great people and give them a great history that they could look back on for generations to come. And if they don't do that, they're missing an opportunity. And it's not an easy thing to say. Obviously, I know the consequences of war. I know what I'm asking of those refugees. I know what would happen to those individuals. But I would say, hey, you would have our support if you're willing to go there and act in this way and fight for your own country. You're going to have our support. And we're going to have your back.
When you say our support and our back, are you suggesting that the U.S. should just send weapons to the rebels as opposed to sending ground troops?
Absolutely not. I had a conversation with Congressman Rohrabacher recently, and if you don't know his background, he actually went and served with the Mujahideen, and he said something very important about his time serving with them, that he doesn't think it's prudent or right to give somebody weapons and then simply leave them on their own. You have to find a way to go out there to help them, to train them, to potentially lead them. He and I were literally having the conversation that we would go over there and lead those refugees into battle if that was something that was asked of us. That's just how much we believe in making sure that these people have their own vested interest in taking back their own country.
Congressman Brian Mast, thank you very much for being on New Day. Thank you for your service to the country.